friend, you are on the Rebound Live webcast. Today's topic is climbing, and we updated this, the broken ladder. Let me introduce you my special guest, Traci Goodwin, a senior counterintelligence warrant officer, U.S. Army. Traci serves as the U.S. Army senior counterintelligence warrant officer and chief of CI initiatives and readiness. Okay, I could go on and on. Okay, I met Traci at the UNC Board of Visitors meetings. And what came apparent is she's very humble, but she is a registered badass, okay? And more importantly, a Tar Heel. And I am so glad that we are on her team because she is a leader that has climbed this broken ladder and has done an amazing things. Welcome, Traci.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matt. I consider this a privilege and an honor to be here right now.
Well, we're blessed. We're blessed that you serve our great nation. I have so much respect for the military. I carry around this challenge coin that a friend of mine who was in the 1st Cavalry gave me 20 years ago, Matt Karras, Lieutenant Colonel Matt Karras, who at the time was stationed in Fort Bragg. And I've learned so much from the military, you know, from the core values to the use of symbolism, to defining roles, to efficiencies. And I have yet to really understand what you do because you have so many titles and all, you know, the military loves acronyms, right? So you have all these acronyms. And so tell us, the non-military folk here, what you do.
Well, what I do, and first let me just say, of course, with anything with the military and the government, I do have to say a disclaimer. So I'll just go ahead and get that out of the way by saying that the views expressed are my own and do not necessarily reflect the official position of the Department of Defense or of the Army. So what I do at this point in my career is I work to ensure that our young counterintelligence agents coming into the Army are trained and ready to do their jobs as professionals. So a lot of what I do has to do with looking at our training, looking at how the threat over years evolves and how we can make sure that our training is commensurate with the threat that we deal with. And when it comes to counterintelligence, specifically, those are our foreign adversaries that are trying to get an intelligence advantage over the United States Army. So we're talking about individuals who may provide secrets to our foreign adversaries. And our specific areas are international terrorist organizations and foreign intelligence organizations and the people involved in that.
Gotcha. Wow. Small little job. You know, we all go to work and, you know, some of us are consultants, some of us are agents, some of us are bankers. And, you know, we're doing what we do and we think it's pretty important. And then here comes Traci. It is amazing. How did you decide to get into this line of work?
Well, that's a really interesting question because a lot of it has to do with, one, why I joined the Army, and then two, why I decided to do what I'm doing. So what I decided to do once I got in the military was, originally I wanted to be an interrogator. And interrogators actually interrogate prisoners, detainees. So in any type of...
I'm going to interrupt you. Why an interrogator?
Well, I was looking for something that was going to be in the intelligence business. And I was trying to figure out what would be most interesting. I like to talk. I like to ask questions. Let's try this interrogator thing. Let me try that. So the Army actually has interrogators that have languages. So my road to being a counterintelligence agent was kind of not the normal way. So I started as an interrogator. So I went to basic training. But before that, I had to get a language. So my language was German. So I went to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, after I went to basic training. So I go to basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Then I go to Monterey, California. I go to German school for about a year. I was there for about a year, 10 months, ends up with holidays and Christmas and stuff like that. Ended up being a year. So once I finish there, I go to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and I start my interrogator training and realize how much, excuse me, how much I don't like it.
Oh, God.
And so, but I stuck it out and I got to the examination period and I just wasn't doing well. And long story short, there was an officer who looked through my records and said, I think you'd be better suited for counterintelligence. And I said, well, let's try that. I knew what it was. I knew what they did. So I ended up, while I was in my initial entry training, switching to counterintelligence. The benefit was that I got a language. Wow. And so I stayed at Huachuca for quite a long time because I was at the end of my interrogator training when I switched. I was being tested, wasn't testing well. They were going to make an exception for me and retest me a third time because I was so close to passing, but something was not right. And so when this officer interceded and said, I think you'd be better suited for counterintelligence, I had to think about it. I prayed about it. I said, sir, let's do it. So
yeah. How about that?
That's how I ended up.
Yeah, you prayed about it. You prayed about it.
I had to.
Yeah, that so obviously faith's important to you growing up. Is your faith still important to you now?
Oh, it's very important to me because there are things that have happened in my life that could not have happened without grace. And I know that. And there's some things that I've had to go through in my life and in my career that I know I could not have made it through without depending on the Lord. And also, the Lord sends people into your life at certain times to walk you through things. And sometimes they're there for a season and sometimes they're there for a lifetime. And I realize that. Yeah. And I'm grateful for it.
What challenges did you face? I mean, me faced a lot of challenges. What were the biggest challenges you faced, whether it be growing up, through the military, your personal life, because you've got a heck of a journey. And I love that the fact that you're willing to share that with everybody on this broadcast.
Oh, yes, of course. So my father was in the military and, excuse me, I wrote a little bit about my experience as a child and what I went through and what I saw. So my dad, and I didn't see these things until later. My father joined the military, and I think I wrote this in a little bit about myself before this. My father joined the Army in 1958, and the armed forces, through an executive order, had been integrated about 10 years before that, 1948. So my dad joined the military as a way to get equal pay for doing a good job and an opportunity to get promoted, an opportunity to show his worth and be of value and also serve his country. And even though it had been 10 years since integration in the armed forces had taken place, it's one thing to change policy. It's another thing to change people's hearts and minds. And so my father experienced some discrimination. We were in North Carolina in 1968. That's when my father got stationed in North Carolina. And, the United States was not integrated by law until 1968. So, my dad joins the Army 10 years after integration of the armed forces and 10 years before the United States abolishes segregation by an executive order. So, he joined the military at a very interesting time. And when we got to Fort Bragg, my parents were looking for housing. They were looking to buy a house downtown. The problem was that the neighborhoods where they wanted to live were segregated. And so my mom and dad did not want us to grow up in a place where, segregation was the order of the day, and we didn't see anybody except other folks that looked like ourselves in our own neighborhood. And so we lived on base. We lived on Fort Bragg because Fort Bragg was integrated.
Yeah.
We went to school with all manner of children. We had all the minorities, we had whites, we had blacks, we had everybody's going to school together. That was the environment that they wanted us to grow up in and to live in. The other part of that was that we very seldom ventured downtown. We did not go into Fayetteville very often at all. And that was because, there were still remnants of segregation. There's a marketplace in the city center of Fayetteville where they used to sell slaves. My parents, yes, my parents just did not want us to grow up thinking that we were less than, but they also didn't want us to think that we were better than anyone else. Yeah. So that was the dichotomy. So the challenges that I didn't realize until a lot later. As a child, I'm just a child. I see a couple of things. I don't really realize what's going on with my parents. I realized that much later. Mm-hmm. The challenges that I experienced going into the military were not really overt, but it was a realization that I worked, especially in my business, counterintelligence, military intelligence in general. I realized in a lot of instances that I was the only female or I was the only Black female. And I realized that in some instances, I realized that I had to prove myself. I had to use my voice, and I had to learn how to do that. And you also, when you're in the military, sometimes in units that are predominantly male, especially when you go to a combat arms unit or a line unit, as we call it, where you're dealing with a lot of the specialties that either are infantry or support infantry, it's male oriented for sure. Mm-hmm. So you want to maintain, or at least I did. I wanted to maintain the fact that I was a female, but I also did not want people to think that I wanted special favors.
Yeah.
Or that because I was a female, I couldn't open my door. I couldn't lift, this foot locker. I couldn't do it. And so I was really independent. And, I would have male soldiers say, well, let me help you. And I'd say, no, I got it. So I was trying to overcompensate, right, to make them understand that, yes, I'm a female, but yes, I'm going to carry my own. Yeah. I'm going to do as much as I can to prove to you that I am not a weakling, that I can hold my own, and that I am a part of this team that should be included.
Right. Right. What was there had to be a time, because we all need help. And mm-hmm. and my friend Brian Moran introduced me to a line that now is mine. Vulnerability is the new invincibility. So at some point you had to show some vulnerability in your role. I mean, because we all need help, right? So right. What was that first time when you showed vulnerability as a soldier?
That is a good question. That is a really good question. I'm trying to think of a time when I realized that I needed help. Well, I guess I would have to say that um, it was probably something that I had to deal with emotionally. And so I'm trying to pull to figure out when that happened. Well, when I was Germany was my first duty assignment after I finished all my schooling. And I had a roommate, and my roommate was a female. We were living in the barracks. And there were some things that I just couldn't get. Some of the things about Army life are not easy. And there's some things that you have to put together. You get all of your kit, you get all of your equipment, but it's not put together. And so you have to figure out how to put that stuff together. And I will tell you that there were people, mostly males, that knew how to put that stuff together. And I had to ask for help, and I didn't want to. And I know it sounds kind of silly, but I didn't want to ask for help, but I had to, because I was trying to figure out how to make, we used to have these steel pots for helmets, right? And there was a piece of cloth, and there were some clamps and some buckles, and you had to put the camouflage cloth over the steel pot and make it look like it was one piece, like the helmet and that piece of cloth were one and the same. And for the life of me, I could not figure out how to do that, because I'd always have puckers and it wouldn't be sitting right. And so it just did. I looked like an unprofessional soldier with this helmet on. I did not realize that you have to wet the material before you put it on this hard steel pot to make it adhere and make it look like one piece of equipment. And it just, things like that. How do you spit shine your boots to make them look like a mirror? That's when we had, the boots that shine.
Do you really spit on the boots?
No, well, some people do. I do not. I did not. But you can.
You talked. You made a comment, and I challenged Stephanie to take notes and pull some nuggets. You said you can change policy. Changing policy is basically easier than changing the hearts and minds of people.
Yes, I think so.
Oh yeah, no, I love that. I love that comment. The world is still, we still have our issues. How do you suggest that we as a country, we as a society, we have on this call, do a better job of changing our hearts and minds towards other people? Because I can only imagine, we all get prejudged, right? At some point,
Right.
But you as a Black woman in the Army probably dealt with prejudice more than anybody on this call. So there's got to be an amazing frustration with that. How did that feel? And then how do you recommend we change the hearts and minds of people, not only on this call, but in our society?
Well, one of the things that I've had to learn is that even when you're dealing with adversity, and sometimes it comes in the form of prejudice, you have to realize that sometimes it's not about you. A lot of times it's not about you as a person. It's about not knowing people other than at face value. And it's very interesting that you asked that question, because one of my UNC colleagues, and just as a side note, I do have a Tar Heel chat group that we meet up and we talk about things. And so surprisingly enough, or appropriately enough, one of our Tar Heel group, and I'll just use his first name, John, he provided an article about contact theory. And the theory is that it's easier to distill or dispel some of the prejudices and some of the things that make people hate or dislike or make them be afraid. Sometimes it's about getting to know people on a deeper level. It's about that one-on-one communication, and it's about he calls it contact theory, and it's an article that he sent to all of us. And it's about the fact that you actually can kind of break down some of those walls when you get together for a common goal. And one of the examples was the military, where we have we have an ultimate goal. We have a vision, and we're all going after the same thing. And it creates an environment where we work with people of all different races, all different backgrounds. We all come together for a common good. And we learned to talk to one another as people.
Mhm.
Just looking
It-
at this.
It's one of the beautiful things I love about sports.
Yeah.
Growing up, white guy on Long Island, going to
Mm,
the city, and
Yep.
if I could play, they didn't care what color I was. I went to North Carolina. I was
Yeah.
the only white starter in the 1982 Final Four.
Yes,
I played as many minutes as Patrick Ewing in the national championship game.
I remember.
And that's meritocracy. That's like, and I have friends as a result that are black guys that I don't even think about their skin color, and there's that common goal. And you call that contact theory?
Contact theory. It was in an article that John sent. It's I think it was a CNN a special focus, and I think it makes sense as I think about it, because in the Army you go through a lot together. You go through a lot as a team, and there is a team mentality when it comes to the Army, whether it's a small team or a larger team. And you know we go through a lot together. Basic training, it's horrible. I mean, I won't say it's horrible, but it does put you through your paces. And you have a group of women or a group of men who are going through the same misery together, and they come through it together.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates a bond. It
Yeah.
does. It creates a bond. And it's not about your color. It's not about your race. It's not about your ethnic background. It's about you being a valued part of that team dynamic, whatever it is.
Yeah, it breaks down your individual. You get your hair shaved. You're in a uniform, right? There's a reason they call it a uniform.
Right.
And I think nowadays, one of the things when I played for Coach Smith, we all wore the same shoe and it had to be the same color because it was part of the uniform. And now I watch these college games or these NBA games, and they're wearing all these different color shoes that
Right.
don't have anything with their team's color scheme. And they're wearing, maybe a headband or, to really strive to be individualistic in a team sport.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. What would you tell, this is a typical interview question, not only your younger self, but we have a couple of women on this call. What would you tell your younger self as a female in the military? And what would you tell the other women on this call? And as a result, hopefully the men, the hard-headed, thick-headed, especially Irish Catholic men, can learn something from the bright minds of the women on this call.
Well, for a younger me, I would say find your voice. Find your voice early. Do not be afraid to speak up. Let people hear you. I do mentor some young women and young men, because I think some people think that women should only mentor women. Men mentor men and women. I think a lot of women think that they should only mentor women, but I think there's value in a woman mentoring men because you teach them or show them how to uh, work with other women and how to treat them with respect. So I have male and female mentees, but for the young females, the young women, I would say find your voice and I actually find as many mentors as you can, because not one mentor alone is going to give you all the coaching in all the areas that you may need. I think I had mentors who sought me out. I should have been seeking them out, and I wasn't as a young soldier. But I did have people who took me under their wing and showed me the ropes. But I wish I had actually sought them out instead of waiting for them to, you know.
Well,
find-
did that have anything to do with, you know, what comes through is your determination and your grit,
Mhm.
your focus, your, in a good way, of stubbornness that I'm going to show you I can do. um,
Yeah.
So your biggest strength's your biggest weakness. I say that all the time, right? My biggest strengths, I'm intense, I'm driven, focused. Well, I can be too intense, too driven, too focused. And so that can get you in trouble. It's like if you have a dog with the electric fence, you know, you get to the electric fence and you get, you know, I wish I had a doggy collar sometimes so I wouldn't cross the line.
Mhm.
So what sounds like your biggest strength is that toughness, stubbornness, determination.
Mhm.
Maybe that, looking back, maybe that's why you didn't seek a mentor as quickly as you did. Is there any, what are your thoughts about that comment?
Well, I think you're probably right. I didn't want to appear weak, and that was a wrong thought. You know, I was always trying to overcompensate. Like I said before, you know, I can lift that foot locker. It's not too heavy for me, you know. And there were times when I might be the only female in a running formation, and every Friday we ran, every Friday. And so I knew I had to get in shape because I'm not a runner. I'm just not. But I had to become one. And I remember running, and I might be the only female or one of two females. And the other female was my roommate. Her name was Beth. And I'd say, Beth, I don't care if I die the minute this run is done. I am not going to fall out. And I remember the men in the formation looking to see if we were going to fall out, because they were not going to fall out if we didn't. That's just the game of will. It's just, you know, it's crazy. But it was something where I felt like, okay, I'm going to be stubborn. I'm not going to relent. So I think sometimes you learn to be so tough that when you do need help, you don't know how to ask for
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Wow.
Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah,
And there's a fine line with that, you know.
yeah.
You
You
have
don't
to
ask for help in the Doherty household.
right.
Moran, I think you grew up in a similar atmosphere as I did, with like one of 9 Irish Catholic, Rockville Center. If you showed any weaknesses, your brother just pounced on it, right?
You were Tuesday night's dinner and you show weakness. Traci, this is fantastic. I appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Matt is right. I grew up, I was one of 7 kids,
Wow.
six boys and a girl.
Wow.
And my parents had 6 of us in 7 years. So it's like a traffic jam in my house every day. But my sister, it's interesting, she was the second oldest.
Mhm.
And I go on record as saying she is the meanest, nastiest, toughest person I have ever met in my life. She's a lawyer, no surprise, right? But yeah, her and my mother once said to us when we were very young, she said, you know, growing up, we would complain and stuff like that. My mother would say, there's no glory in being a victim, so stop it.
Mm.
And that was it. I mean, I appreciated the fact that we were all treated equally, because if not, I was the lowest, person on the totem pole.
Right.
But, who you are today is a result of the adversity that you overcame. And there's something to be said about that, right? And I feel like a little bit, we want to make things equal. We want to make every opportunity available for everybody. But if we take away the adversity, are we taking away the training that people need in order to succeed in life? I say, as parents, like, you need to let your kids fall so you can pick them back up. The single worst thing we can do is bubble wrap the next generation, because by the time we take it off, they'll be too fragile to do anything. So what are your feelings about that? And what are you seeing in the young woman that's coming up through the ranks right now that was you however many years ago? What kind of adversity is she facing today?
Well, I think there's a little there. What you say is very, very important, because I do think that the young folks, not just the women, but the men as well, a lot of them have a sense of entitlement. And I think that a lot of the younger generations were shielded from adversity. They didn't have a chance to fail. Everybody got a trophy. Everybody did well. Well, not everybody is going to do well in everything. And learning how to deal with failure, learning the lessons and moving forward is an important part of who you are and who you become as a person, being able to deal with things. Because let's be honest, adversity is going to come. It's going to happen. As long as you are breathing, you are going to encounter at some points in your life adversity. And I've heard this a lot, but it's very true. It's not about what happens to you. It's how you deal with what's happening to you, or what happens to you. And so you have to have a level of resilience. You have to learn how to overcome. And one of the things that the Army has is a resiliency program. And one of the important parts of that is being able to walk through adversity and see yourself coming out on the other side.
Wow, that I've never heard of that before. It makes total sense. I want you to do a deeper dive. And Patrick, I love the name Patrick Moynihan, by the way. I mean, Jesus. We probably are from the same families, probably from the same county in Ireland. Resiliency program, talk more about that. And what is the biggest, I mean, you shared some of your personal, you been divorced, so I want you to share your biggest challenge, adversity, personal and professional, but talk more about the resiliency program, and then we'll get to Patrick Moynihan.
Well, the resiliency program that the Army has is based on introspection. A part of it is introspection, looking at yourself, looking at the relationships that you have, and actually figuring out how to deal with adversity and come out the other side a better person for it, or at least having learned lessons from it. So, a lot of it in the beginning was based on individuals who see combat, individuals who have to deal with PTSD and things that, Army personnel, especially in 20 years of deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, have seen a lot of nasty things. The Army wants to not only provide that in-depth counseling and referring you to professionals when you have issues that you have to deal with when it comes to adversity. And a lot of that has to do with being exposed to combat. But it also talks about, in a general sense, being able to deal with adversity in I won't say a positive way, but not in a negative way. The ability to realize that there is something better on the other side, and that when you are going through adversity, the key word is going through it, getting to the other side. And while you're going through it, realizing that there is another side and that you are going to come out of it, and that you will have learned lessons, and that you can take those lessons and walk through the rest of your existence, carrying those lessons with you. When it comes to professional adversity, dealing with the loss of people that you work with. Now, when I was deployed to Iraq, one morning my colleague and I, we were walking into work, and it was dark. It was still 5 o'clock in the morning. We're in Iraq, and off in the distance, we see an explosion. Now, we hadn't been there but about 2 weeks. We were about 2 weeks or 3 weeks into our deployment, our year-long deployment. And we see this explosion off in the distance. And so we start running because we know that something has happened. And as it turns out, we had lost 2 of our people. So that set the tone for our whole deployment. Dealing with that loss so early, dealing with the loss of 2 individuals, very young, and looking at a year deployment that started out that way. So we had to deal with that. We also had to deal with the fact that we had a job to do, and our job was to make sure that the rest of us went through that year and got home safely. So it was kind of a unifying moment when you think about it, but it wasn't. It was extremely difficult to deal with. You know, soldiers are supposed to be able to deal with that kind of adversity probably better than the average population, but on a certain level, it is difficult. It's difficult to do. So, I mean, that was a group adversity. The professional adversity that I've had to deal with personally is figuring out how to navigate some things that have happened to me that weren't really that bad, because I was able to work through them, but trying to figure out how to work with men who sometimes don't see you as an equal and say things about you that are not true. And your reputation is very important to you. So I have actually been accused, formally and informally, of EEO violations.
What does EEO stand? What does that stand for?
Equal employment opportunity. So equal opportunity. So I was actually accused of, at one time, trying to keep other females out of my business, out of what I do. And it was done by a senior person, and they actually put it out in a group environment where people that I worked with, people that I worked for, heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And it really hurt me, because one of my friends called and told me what was said. And it was something to the effect that I didn't want other women to come into this profession, and that I was doing everything I could to keep that from happening. And so she said to me, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. But what I had to figure out, what I had to meditate about was, I need to let my superiors handle this. So I took it to my superiors, and they took care of it. What I had to realize was that I was not going to make things better by saying things, by speaking out about it myself. Right. And based on my reputation, and this is one thing that I sometimes talk to females and males about, let your reputation speak for itself when adversity comes.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah.
What happened was, when this senior individual started talking, he described me as, without using my name, there's a female in another unit. He gave my rank, he gave that I was Black, and he gave what I did. Well, I was only one.
Yeah.
So my friends in that group said, that sounds like Traci.
Right.
And they said, that's not her. No way did she do that. There's no way. And that was because they knew me as a person, and they knew my professional reputation. So when I say let your reputation speak for itself, I truly believe in that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Patrick.
Hey, Traci, thank you for all this.
Tell us a little bit, Patrick,
that.
where are you from? What do you do?
So I'm an assistant coach at Appalachian State. And so, I've always been very fond of, military stuff, because it's essentially team building at its core at the highest level.
Yeah.
And so my question, it's a little bit of pivot on the adversity, but by the way, the adversity, going through adversity, the through stuff is awesome.
Yep.
It just reminded me of, like, if your adversity is a storm, and if you just sit in that storm, it's just going to be longer. It's going to take longer. But if you keep trudging through it, then you're going to get through it faster. But my question is, like, in the military, you have to build trust quickly, and you got to do it fast. And so I don't know, with your background, counterintelligence, and even the interrogation, you got to build trust quickly as well. And so what are some techniques that you use? Because for coaching, every single year, it's almost a new team, and you're building trust amongst these individuals that you have the best interests for them and for their progression in their career. So, what are some tactics that you potentially use for building trust? And then, on the other side, how do you get them to trust you quickly enough to be able to, understand and help them?
There's an assistant coach dealing with the transfer portal. So he, for those of you who don't follow college athletics, he's got to develop that rapport quickly and as deeply as possible to try to keep a roster intact. Patrick, yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things about being a counterintelligence agent is most of us are extroverts. We like to talk. And so when I come into a new organization, because we move around quite a bit, and we're always being introduced to another team. So you're either part of the team or you're leading the team. In most instances, within the last 20, 25 years, I've been coming into units where I have been the person who's going to take charge, who's going to be in charge of at least a group of agents. So the first thing I realize is they watch everything that I do. I've realized that. I'm a Black female. I come in, most of them are non-Black. There's some other minorities, but I'm the Black female. I'm the chief. I'm walking in. They don't know me. I am new to them, and they watch every single thing I do. One of my soldiers later, when I first came into a unit, said, the first thing we noticed about you was that you wore nail polish. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's the first thing they noticed about me. But what I do to build trust is I get to know them as people. And once I get to know them as people, I find out about what's going on in their lives, how they deal with things. How many single soldiers do I have? How many married ones do I have? And treating them all the same with regards to trying to learn a little bit about them. I usually let them know a little less about me because I'm the one in charge, but I do make sure that I express an interest in what it is that they're going through with their families, how many children they have, how their kids are doing, because it's all about making sure that they are effective at work. And they can't be effective at work if their family life is in chaos and nobody cares about it. So I come in, they know that I'm in charge. I express to them some of my isms. Everybody has isms. I have certain things that I like done a certain way as the boss. But the other thing that I do is, as a warrant officer, I will get down there. If they have something that they have to do, whether it's painting rocks or whether it's sewing camo net, I will get out there and I'll do it with them, because I don't want them ever to think that I'm going to ask them to do something that I won't do myself. If we have to put up a tent, I'm out there putting up the tent with them. So that's how I build rapport with them, and get them to feel that they can trust me, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for them and they need to know that.
All right, Traci, what are a couple of your isms? I mean, I couldn't let that slide. Give us an ism or two.
Well, I am I like order. So one of my isms is keep your space neat. And so we do a lot of report writing. And there are certain things that I like to see when reports are written. So one of my isms is, don't use that all the time. Take that out of your sentences. When you're writing. And I have a boss right now who is like this. She does not like passive voice. Use active voice when you write. Speak clearly. Make sure people understand. Say what you mean what you say. If someone asks a question about what you're saying, then that means you have to explain it or talk more clearly to make sure that they understand it. So I have a few isms in my offices if I'm in charge.
Give for the Chaminade graduate, Marquette graduates, give us an example of active versus passive voice.
Active voice is I kicked or Traci kicked the ball. Passive voice is the ball was kicked.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Moran, I shouldn't have teed that up right before you wrote, as you had your hand raised, because I have a feeling there'll be some fallout from it, but go ahead.
Not at all, Matt. Not at all. Remember, dog fire hydrant. No, Traci, you bring up a great point though, Traci, and I'd like you to talk about, if you can, the proactive versus the reactive mindset. The title for this Rebound Live webcast was Climbing an Unstable Ladder.
Right.
Now, a reactive mindset is not going to be thinking that at some point between the bottom rung and the top rung, there's going to be adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll suddenly have to deal with adversity when they come to that rung. The proactive mindset is going to say, there's going to be adversity along the way, and this is what it might look like, and this is how I'm going to respond. So when that senior officer started to question your character, and there's a great line, I think it was John Wooden, don't confuse character with reputation, because reputation is what other people think about you, and when character is what you really are. And I watched my mother and sister actually deal with a lot of that adversity, because as they climb the rung, they become more and more of a threat. And there are only so many chairs in the game of musical chairs, whether it's in the Army or in sports or in business. And so somebody's going to have their knife out to put it into your back. And that knee-jerk reaction that you may have when somebody questions your character is going to say more about you than the person who said it.
Right.
And it sounds like you somehow, either you were born with that or you learned that early on, where you allowed your senior officer to respond to it. That's really, really hard to do. So are you born with that? Are you taught that? Or is it a combination of that, having that proactive mindset to adversity?
I think I definitely wasn't born with it. I to develop that over time. And I had to watch other people, because you learn from your failures. If you're really paying attention, you can learn from your failures, or you learn from other people's failures. So watching other people and learning how to respond as opposed to react is something that you can sometimes watch other people and they are reactive and the outcome's not great. You can go through something and realize, wow, when I was younger, when I was a junior soldier, I was more reactive and I didn't get the results that I wanted. Maybe I need to do a little research. Maybe I need to do a little more listening and realize that sometimes, or in most instances, a knee-jerk reaction to something is not going to get you to the end game that you want.
Yep.
And it's going to derail your progress. So I had to learn that. I had to learn by watching other people and making some mistakes, speaking out of turn. I remember one time when I spoke out of turn and I realized it. And the other thing is realizing that you're going to make mistakes and being willing to apologize. I have apologized to soldiers for something that I should have handled differently. And I have learned over time to be a better leader. One, because the military, the Army teaches you, at every promotion, we get leadership training, and leadership training is something that everybody gets if they want to progress in the Army. But there's also those personal lessons that you learn as you go through the Army. And it's watching other people, it's learning from their mistakes, and it's watching the people that you want to emulate. Yeah. So the people that I wanted to emulate were individuals who, some were reactive. Most of them were people who responded instead of reacting. And there are times when I've been called the calming influence, because I have to talk to my superiors and give them an opportunity to think about things. My experiences have been with a lot of males who were in charge of me or were my ultimate boss, that I had to talk to in a way that, even though I was telling them something they didn't want to hear, that they needed to listen to it. And even if they didn't agree with it, I would always say, for the record, this is where I stand on this.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give them the respect of being honest and giving them something maybe that they didn't want to hear, but they needed to hear it.
Yeah, that's powerful. I love the nuances of respond versus react, going through adversity instead of like dealing with adversity. Those nuances, the intentionality of certain words. We have about 6 minutes. Two things.
Mhm.
What is your biggest regret? And who are the truth tellers in your life? Who is the one who or two who said, Traci, you're screwing up here. You need to pivot and do this. That wasn't afraid to address something, that a behavior or decision that needed to be addressed. So biggest regret, and then the truth teller in your life.
Well, I would say the biggest regret in my life, and this is a personal one, my late husband and I spent a lot of time apart. We were both in the military. And we actually spent some time as geographical bachelors, is what the Army calls it. It's when, you have either 2 service members or 1 service member who is living and working in a separate location. And my late husband and I consciously made those decisions to sometimes not live in the same location based on military and plans that we had made. And we didn't spend as much time together as we probably should have or could have, not knowing what the future held. And that is a regret that I have, that I didn't spend as much time with my late husband before he passed. And as far as truth tellers, I think my sister Kim is my biggest truth teller. Yes.
Yeah. How does she tell you? Is it subtle, or is it through the front door, the back door, the side window?
She's a front door kind of person.
All right. Brandon Blell raised her hand. 4 minutes to go. Brandon, what do you have for us? And Traci.
And I think Terry had his hand up before me, but
I didn't see Terry's. It's in the sunlight. It's over the green monster in Fenway. I can't see.
There you go. But I guess while I've got the floor, I don't have a question, Traci. I just want to say thank you for sharing your voice, and also to you, Matt, for inviting voices like Traci and creating this room that is safe and vulnerable, and where we can have these kinds of rich, deep conversations. Because I love what you said, Traci, about finding your voice and finding it early. I'm pushing 50 now, and I'm still trying to find it. And still trying to find the courage to put it out there. And so creating the space and having that vulnerability to open your life and your heart and is really powerful. And I thank you both for it. So
thank you, Brandon. Yeah. Go ahead, Traci. You have a comment?
No, I do appreciate this opportunity. I think this is a wonderful venue and a forum to be able to share some things that hopefully will help other people. And I've learned a lot just sitting here listening and talking and engaging. I think this is great. The things that I have been through, it's been such a personal and a professional journey. And sometimes it's hard to separate the two, because they are so closely interwoven. But I do have to say that I have had some wonderful mentors. I've had some wonderful experiences, and the military has taught me a lot. And I do give credit to my parents, who taught me so much just by watching them, by them.
Amen. Hey, we got 30 seconds. Terry Lyons, the trader from Boston. By the way, the Bruins went down big. I can't imagine. And then the Celtics. Wow. Anyway, go ahead, Terry.
You're cutting into the ability to feed my family there, Matt. You know, they got to watch it. It's the dog food is expensive these days. First, Traci, obviously, your journey's been amazing, and your service and being in harm's way. We all thank you for that. And I can only imagine how difficult that is. I guess I just have a quick question, and then one quick comment. Matt, I think, we had a speaker on here that deals with the post-traumatic stress, and I would like you to introduce you to him at some point. He speaks with the military, works out of the Pentagon a lot, Bob Delaney. So Matt, let's figure that out on another day. But I guess the question I have now is, are you primarily based in the United States now doing your work, or are you still traveling?
I do travel, but I am based out of the United States. I actually work at the Pentagon.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. That might help in the prior thing I said. So I'll let it go for now in interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you
very much, Terry. Traci, thank you for taking the time to do this. Thank you for your service to our country. And thank you for being a role model for a lot of people, and a lot of people you probably don't even know you're a role model for.
Yes, I do appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity. This was tremendous. I do appreciate the fact that you asked me to come on, and I'm honored, and I feel it was a privilege to be a part of this. Thank you.
Oh, God bless you, Traci. I'll
God
see you
bless-
at the next Board of Visitor meeting.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes. Thanks, guys.